Welcome to Fashion And with me, Scott Schiavone, fashion curator. Just a reminder that you can keep up to date with everything Fashion And by following at Fashion And with Scott Schiavone on Instagram and by hitting that subscribe button. In this episode, we will be looking at fashion from a period in history known literally as the Beautiful Era. This is Fashion and the Belle Époque. Nothing succeeds like excess. The Belle Époque, French for beautiful era, is the term often given to a period of history usually between 1890 and the outbreak of World War I in 1914. The period was characterised by optimism, relative peace, economic prosperity and technological, scientific and cultural innovations. In this era of European history, the rich and privileged by birth experienced a time of extreme well-being and comfort, and due to the way they dressed, the fashion industry flourished. Grand couturiers such as Worth, Doucet, Paquin, Lucile and Poiret dictated fashion, and the seasonal fashion cycle as we know it today began to take shape. During this period, the fashionable silhouette changed many times as fashion trends came and went in speedy succession. From the vibrant colours, puffed sleeves, nipped waistlines, rich fabrics, fringes, beadwork and furs from the 1890s to the luxurious fashions of the Edwardian era with their artificial flowers, lace, ruffles, fabric appliqué, beads, sequins and embroideries. Fashion became synonymous with luxury and opulence. By 1914, the old way of dressing had been abandoned in favour of a new extravagance pioneered by Paul Poiret and his colourful, what was then referred to as Orientalist designs. In this episode, we'll be exploring the opulence and excess of fashion in the Belle Époque through four themes: defining Belle Époque fashion, Belle Époque beauties, Belle Époque designers and Art Nouveau. Delving into the world of Belle Époque fashion is like entering a fantasy world, a mythological universe of frivolous fabric, frills and embellishment. In terms of fashionable dress, the Belle Époque was not marked by a single distinct style, but by an ongoing metamorphosis of dress that continuously shifted the female silhouette. In the 1890s, fashion and style was characterised by dark colours and high collars, and stiff steel boning in long line bodices and corsets. Gigot or Lego mutton sleeves once again reached gargantuan proportions, and pyramid-style gored skirts with smooth fronts and pleated centre backs fell from tiny wasp-like waists. Whereas day wear exposed nothing below the chin, evening and ball dresses had low-cut necklines and were made from lighter, softer colours such as pinks, greens and creams. In Paris, the House of Worth, founded in 1858 by Charles Frederick Worth, excelled in producing garments that exemplified the era. Luxurious bespoke fabrics, fur trimmings, gold ornamentation, feathers, tassels, embroideries and pearls all emphasised the beauty of indulgence, and the house produced some of the period's best known styles. In 1901, after the death of Queen Victoria, King Edward VII ushered in the hedonistic Edwardian era, and a change of fashionable dress followed. Pastel colours, sumptuous fabrics and trimmings such as frills, flounces, lace, gauze, silk chiffon, tulle, crêpe de chine and ribbon were the order of the day. Departing from the Victorian hourglass figure, fashion trends revolved around the S-shaped female silhouette. The S-bend corset forced the hips back and the bust forward, creating a pigeon chest with monobosom. This slim, corseted silhouette, along with round décolleté necklines, lavish jewellery and accessories including parasols and incredible lavish wide-brimmed hats trimmed with ribbons and feathers, became ubiquitous. The use of exotic bird feathers had become such an issue that the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds was founded to campaign against feathers being used for fashionable dress. Fashion, shopping and conspicuous consumption became a ritual as ladies spent much of their time visiting their couturiers and milliners to peruse and purchase their latest creations. Society women changed at least 4 times a day, and to ensure women were buttoned and hooked into their elaborate gowns, a lady's maid was essential for dressing and for doing hair. Wealthy women would visit the haute couture houses of Paris in late February and March to choose their spring and summer clothes, and in late August and September for their autumn-winter wardrobe. Etiquette dictated that peignoirs and lingerie, simple costumes for the morning errands and more ornate ones for morning visits, luncheon dresses, afternoon gowns, tea gowns and walking dresses, gowns for visiting and those to be worn when receiving visitors were all essential items. That's a lot of dresses. Women would also have an endless list of gowns for official ceremonies, receptions, dinner parties, concerts, attending the theatre and going to balls. Not to mention outfits for cycling, walking and other outdoor leisure activities. Sportswear, whose popularity had started to gain momentum, followed the fashionable silhouette of the day. Sportswear usually had minimal surface decoration and was often paired with a masculine cravat and flat cap. Even when playing tennis or cycling, women wore corsets, but these were normally smaller and more lightly boned than the regular ones. Accessories became ever more important and provided that extra layer of decoration. Women would not be seen without huge hats furnished with extravagant and exotic feathers or silk flowers and other accessories such as gloves, parasols, shoes and fans. By 1908, ribbons and lace and ruches and pleats were slowly being discarded in favour of a simpler, more pared down elegance. There was a shift towards a more tubular silhouette and a return to the empire waisted style gowns of the early 19th century. This shift towards freeing women from the restraints of their corsets was pioneered by couturiers such as Paquin, Paul Poiret and Madeleine Vionnet, who provided the last gasp of opulence before World War I and the dawning of the new 20th century woman. Created in the United States by artist Charles Dana Gibson, the Gibson girl was the personification of the feminine ideal of physical attractiveness that defined the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The Gibson girl was drawn as youthful and strong, fun-loving yet sophisticated. She was tall and slender with a long neck, ample bust and hips, statuesque, narrow-waisted with the typical S-shaped feminine figure. Her upswept hair piled high upon her head in the contemporary bouffant, pompadour and chignon fashions was all the rage, and her aristocratic bearing inspired young women everywhere. She was smart, independent, charming and intelligent. To create the perfect woman, Gibson combined elements of the old and the new. From the old, he took the basic slender lines and a sense of respectability. From the new, he took a large bust and hips. She was also athletic and could be found taking part in the new activities of the leisure classes, such as cycling. However, she would never have participated in the suffragette movement. In Paris in 1886, the Folies Bergère opened its doors, and in 1889 the Moulin Rouge followed. Women at both establishments danced the can-can, a high-energy, physically demanding dance. Stars such as Louise Weber or La Goulou, the Queen of Montmartre, and Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec's muse Jane Avril emerged and were highly paid for their appearances at the Moulin Rouge and elsewhere. Maison Lucile designed the costumes for English actress and singer Lily Elsie in The Merry Widow and recognised in the young actress the perfect face to promote her fashions. Lily Elsie was photographed on and off stage wearing gowns by Lucile. She was at the forefront of popularity, but was soon joined by other Edwardian and Belle Époque beauties. The period from 1890 to 1914 was the pinnacle of Parisian couture fashion. Grand couturiers dictated fashionable styles, and wealthy women of the Belle Époque flocked to their salons to be dressed by their hand. Established in 1858, the House of Worth became synonymous with opulence and the powerful fashion elite. Charles Frederick Worth prided himself on the fact that his house set no overall trends, because my clientele looked for individual toilettes, and they were also extremely expensive. In the 1890s, Jean-Philippe Worth replaced his father as head designer, and his brother Gaston Worth took over care of the business side. The period from the 1890s to around 1910 was dominated by the French fashion powerhouse. Worth designs produced during the Belle Époque are among some of the most opulent of the period. Jean-Philippe shared his father's love of the spectacular. Silk, muslin, taffeta, lace, velvet, embroidery, organdy and furs were mixed and matched to create day and evening dresses. It was when designing evening wear that Jean-Philippe really went crazy, theatrical and extravagant. At the International Exhibition of 1900, Gaston Worth was président de classe for the clothing categories of the exhibits and was awarded the Légion d'honneur for his efforts. The house continued to dress the most elegant women of the period, including Elizabeth de Cameron-Chimay, the Comtesse Greffeux, Consuela Vanderbilt, the Duchess of Marlborough, and Lady Curzon, Viceroy of India. Jeanne Paquin established her Maison de Couture in 1891 at No. 3 Rue de la Paix in Paris, next to the celebrated House of Worth. Initially, Jeanne designed in the typical Belle Époque style, favouring the pastels, frills and lace so fashionable at the time. The house became so successful that by 1896 the company had set up offices in London, followed by New York, Madrid and Buenos Aires. At the International Exhibition in 1900, Jeanne Paquin was elected president of the fashion exhibit, and the selection of couture houses who were invited to participate was left to her. Her designs were featured prominently at the exhibition, and Jeanne even created a mannequin of herself for the display. Like her contemporary Paul Poiret, in 1908 Paquin presented garments in the latest fauve colours and directoire cut, modified for ease of wearing with side slits or draped panels in narrow skirts. In 1913, Jeanne accepted France's prestigious Légion d'honneur. She was the first woman designer to receive the honour, and during World War I, Jeanne was the first woman to serve as Présidente of the Chambre Syndicale de la Couture. Society tottered through the last of the pre-war parties, waved tiny handkerchiefs and carried elaborate parasols until the war came with its sweeping changes. Lucy Wallace, later Lady Duff Gordon, launched her business Lucile Limited in London in 1893. With no formal training or experience, she joined the ranks of London court dressmaker in 1895. In 1902, the Queen magazine noted that Maison Lucile was synonymous with good style, original and suitable to the different occasions of the season. Her flair for fashion and design can be seen in her surviving sample book for the autumn season of 1905, now in the collection at the V&A, which is a cornucopia of sketches, fabrics and trimmings. Collections presented in albums like this enabled clients to envisage the finished effect of each garment and to request any changes that they required. Some of the designs bear names such as The Tender Grace of a Day That Is Dead, and each garment embodies the epitome of Belle Époque style and grace. She was at her best when she was designing svelte trailing gowns redolent of pleasure and romance, and had an immense talent for layering delicate fabrics and trimmings to produce effects that were refined rather than overwhelming. By 1911, the business had expanded to New York and Paris, with a Chicago branch launching in 1915. Known as Le Magnifique, Paul Poiret is said to have changed the landscape of women's fashions, freeing women's bodies from the restraints of their corsets. This is not entirely true, as other designers such as Jean Paquin and Madeleine Vionnet also endorsed and pioneered corset-free fashion. It's just that Paul Poiret stole the limelight through his vigorous self-promotion. However, between 1906 and World War I, Poiret experimented with new silhouettes inspired by the natural shape of the female form and pioneered the what was then called Orientalist movement in dress, a movement that was inspired by the first performance of the Ballet Russe in Paris in the summer of 1909. He pushed aside the subdued Belle Époque palette and rejected the frivolous frills and flounces of women's wear to construct tubular, figure-hugging dresses made in daring colours accessorised with exotic turbans. Paul Poiret's signature designs included the kimono coat, the hobble skirt, the cocoon coat, the harem pant, and perhaps his most recognisable, the lampshade dress, which consisted of a tight hobble skirt or pair of harem pants worn under a lampshade tunic held out with wire and sometimes trimmed with fur. By 1914, Paul Poiret was the king of French haute couture. However, during World War I, he left his fashion house to serve in the military, but when he returned in 1919, the house was no longer at the forefront of fashion, and the business was on the brink of bankruptcy. The Belle Époque's most striking visual manifestation was Art Nouveau, a style of decorative art and architecture that prevailed between 1890 and 1910. It was a sense of style rather than an art movement, and was characterised by flowing lines, natural forms, the use of symbolism, exotic influences, and innovative approaches to materials. Art Nouveau style infiltrated trends in Edwardian and Belle Époque fashion, including activewear, aesthetic dress, dress reform, and haute couture. The 1900 International Exhibition in Paris was the high point for the style. Over 50 million visitors from around the world saw Art Nouveau showcased through fashion, architecture, design, glass, furniture, and the decorative arts. The main entrance to the exhibition was crowned by a statue representing the fashion trade, La Parisienne, in robes designed by the leading couturier Jean Paquin, symbolising that the garments included within the exhibition were to be seen as works of decorative art. We live in one of the rare periods in history when all of the arts, aiming at the same goal of renewal, work together to produce pieces that make up a harmonious ensemble. Many fashion designers appropriated Art Nouveau aesthetics, such as Worth, Lucile, Paquin and Poiret, who produced garments that promoted a new, softer female silhouette, thus embodying the aims of dress reform whilst claiming the status of haute couture. With the outbreak of World War I in 1914, women no longer had time to devote to fashion, and trends like lace frills, large hats and hobble skirts became impractical. The outbreak of war changed the role of women in society, and women required clothing that reflected their new reality. As women took on practical roles to help with the war effort, such as manufacturing and mining, fashion took on a more structured military look, with jobs often requiring uniforms and trousers. Dresses were simplified and skirts were shortened to make them more practical to wear. From the puffed sleeves, nipped waistlines and gored skirts of the 1890s, to the new extravagance pioneered by Paul Poiret and his colourful designs, via the luxurious fashions of the Edwardian era with their artificial flowers, lace, ruffles, beads, sequins and embroideries, Belle Époque fashion, once synonymous with luxury and opulence, had breathed its last breath. The Belle Époque, a period characterised by optimism, relative peace, economic prosperity and technological, scientific and cultural innovations, was over. Europe was at war. Well, that's it for the opulence and extravagance of fashion in the Belle Époque. If you would like to be part of our next Fashionable book club, please send me a message via Instagram at fashionand with Scott Schiavone for more details, including dates and our next book club choice. It's one you won't want to miss. I'll see you next time, but before you go, don't forget to subscribe to Fashionable with me, Scott Schiavone, fashion curator.